Welcome to Sarder TV, an idea-sharing platform founded by Russell Sarder, an author, investor, and CEO of Netcom Learning. I'm Vanessa Tyler. Hey Alexa, what's new in voice AI? If Alexa doesn't have the answer, our next guest, Nithya Thadani, CEO of Rain, certainly does. Nithya, thank you so much for joining us. Talk about your journey in this field of technology.
My journey with technology actually started with strategy, and in many ways it still leads with strategy. I started my career in innovation, and my role has always been to look for consumer insights, understand market trends, identify white space opportunities. And to me, the technology in many ways is the enabler, it's the how, but you still have to understand where you're playing, who you're targeting in order for that technology to actually work effectively. When I joined Rain, my role was really to help the company figure out where they were going to differentiate themselves and play. The company was doing a lot of things in the technology space, more broad marketing technology, so building websites, mobile applications, and I was really brought in to bring us some focus. So we're very quickly seeing the adoption of voice technology and the trends around that space. We had a unique right to win in the space, and so we made the decision to double down and to really focus our efforts on voice. But again, it was strategy first and then the technology led.
Wow, so you kind of make it more user-friendly. You kind of had the human being in mind.
Yeah, you always have to be thinking about, who are you targeting? What's the right use case for voice technology? I think, sometimes the challenge with voice is because people don't know how to use it. So essentially with voice technology, not every use case is right. Voice doesn't always work better than other applications, and I think we have to hold our clients a lot through understanding which use cases are right for voice and which aren't. But when you do find those correct use cases, it's such a more seamless and kind of frictionless platform to engage with consumers on.
You're a woman at the top of a male-dominated industry. Are women finally breaking through in this world of technology?
It's funny, although I'm now in the technology field, this isn't unique to technology, right? I've also worked in financial services and in innovation, which are also two industries that are facing similar issues and trying to close that gender gap. In technology in particular, it is so important that women have a role in shaping the evolution of this industry, because at the end of the day, technology is about human connection. It's about enabling human connection, human interaction, and women have a very unique and different perspective to bring to that world, and they should have a voice in how these interactions are built and how they're designed. Women also over-index in wanting to contribute to society, especially millennial women. And so there's a lot of opportunity for technology to play a role in social innovation. I do think that while we're seeing a lot of progress at the top, the foundation is still off balance. What I mean by that is, today 75% of young girls express interest in STEM fields, but in our industry, only less than a quarter of women are actually in computing and engineering fields. So that balance is off, and if we're really gonna solve a systemic problem around women in technology, we have to kind of target the root of that. We have to get women inspired by technology, but keep them inspired by technology by giving them these real world applications and an understanding of how a career in technology can actually help them to improve society and improve people's lives.
What is your role as CEO of Rain?
Before joining Rain, I've historically been known to friends and family as someone who is very indecisive. There's a very kind of well-celebrated story of us painting our nursery and then painting it again and then painting it again before my daughter was born. And it's ironic because I've now somehow ended up in a role where my full-time job is to make decisions on the fly every single day. From the day that I joined Rain, I was brought in to shape the direction of the company, and I've had to make very big and important decisions about the company's future. My first decision was to pivot the company away from more generalist technology to voice and conversational AI. And while that seemed like a big idea, a big decision at the time, now looking back, it was actually probably one of the easier decisions in the snowball effect of decisions that came after it. And I think I I've learned a lot as a CEO that you do have to be as decisive about all decisions, not just some of them. When we made the decision to pivot the company, I think the very right next step would have been to then right-size the company. But as a first-time CEO, kind of 6 months into the role, I struggled to make that decision, and instead that happened, but it happened a little bit more slowly and painfully over the course of a longer period of time. And so what I've learned is that as a CEO, you have to make both the exciting and the difficult decisions with the same speed and resolution.
So in terms of by right-sizing, that obviously means letting people go.
Yeah, I mean, or transitioning people into roles. When we started out, we were doing so many different things. So we had people at our organization that were doing various roles in technology, and when you decide to focus on voice technology, not everyone fits anymore. And so it's just an exercise of understanding how to kind of change people's positions on the bus and figure out, where they can potentially play in this new direction. And in some cases, either we realized or they realized that it's not right for them.
And this really leads into exactly what you're saying about the role of effective leadership, and that's really where that comes into play.
Yeah, when you think about effective leadership, I think there's always, one of the things I often think about is that there's always this struggle as a CEO to resist that urge to want to do the work, do it all yourself, and instead to create this environment and inspiration for other people to do the work. I had a very close mentor who once told me that you can never fully make the switch to being an effective leader and a CEO unless you're ready to watch your personal view of imperfection walk right past you and out the door to a client. So I was really following that advice, and then I actually had the privilege of having lunch with Scott Galloway, and he told me that he actually edited every single deck that went out his doors before his company sold. So I kind of took that as a license to then jump right back into the work. I think what I've realized is that effective leadership is really knowing how to strike that balance. So you need to give your team the agency to do the work, but also have enough oversight on it and be close enough to it that you can inform company strategy and vision at the same time.
You mentioned millennials. How do you lead a younger generation?
It's challenging, but what I've found to be an effective tactic personally is to show vulnerability and show imperfection. I think I missed that in the beginning, perhaps because I'm a millennial myself, and I felt that I really needed to create this ocean of separation between the leadership team and our younger employees. And what I've realized is, while you do want some separation there, you need to have some level of professionalism. You probably don't want to be the last woman standing at the holiday party. You really do want to make those connections. You have to make those bonds with your employees. They're looking for relatability, especially young employees, and they want a leader who's going to share stories about their family, who's going to admit leadership mistakes, who's even going to be a little bit uncensored and passionate about their political views. And I think that's how you start to really form the building blocks of a relationship with employees that's going to inspire them to want to work with you.
Your business instinct is a skill. For you, was it built or born?
I think it's a combination of the both, but I do believe that business instinct is something that you can train and build up, but you have to practice it in the same way that you would practice yoga or meditation. And that means paying attention to details that you haven't in the past. It means looking for patterns, recognizing your own bias. And I think most importantly, it means really immersing yourself in the data and the information, but then stepping away from it. I'm a big believer that creativity and instinct really come from giving your mind time to simmer and make connections. It's why some of our most profound thoughts come to us in the middle of the night. And so I do think business instinct is something that you can build. And at the end of the day, every leader is in the business of human behavior in some form or another. So it's really important that you're cultivating your ability to make decisions with both your head and your heart.
Talk to us about RAIN and its dominance in this field of, voice AI.
So Rain is a conversational AI company that builds voice technology for Fortune 100 brands. So we work with Nike, Starbucks, Marriott, Nestle as examples, and we really help them understand how this technology can integrate into their organizations, but also how it can help them better connect with consumers. Our dominance in voice AI has really come from our philosophy around system thinking, and this is something that we preach to our clients. You can't think about voice technology in isolation. It's not a one-off campaign or something that you can build in one division of your business and kind of set it and forget it. It really has to be integrated into your mobile strategy, your web strategy, your search, all of these different aspects of your digital ecosystem, or it's simply not going to be effective. In the example we gave earlier of Starbucks, where we built a voice application where users could order their regular coffee through Alexa and then go pick it up at a local Starbucks, that seems like a very seamless transaction, but it works so well because it's a system approach. That command to Alexa is connected to the mobile data in my pocket, which is connected to the geolocation data at the local store, which is linked to my account anywhere in the world. Again, it's all a system, and our dominance has really come from building experiences around that system approach.
What is the latest with conversational AI? You mentioned that ordering your Starbucks, but is that where the latest we're going with that right now?
Yeah, so I can give you a couple trends that are happening in the space. One would be there has definitely been an emergence of what we would call owned assistants or first-party assistants. We saw this with BBC. They've recently launched one called Beeb. Bank of America has launched its own AI assistant called Erica. And these assistants are not meant to compete with the big tech players like Google and Amazon. They'll probably still have experiences on those platforms, but by creating their own AI assistants, they're actually able to collect more rich data and build a more rich profile of the consumer, and then on the back end actually create more connected and seamless interactions when that customer is within their own ecosystem. Another trend that we're seeing is that voice is appearing in many places outside of the speaker, and one of the most exciting new touch points for voice is the car. Today, twice as many people are actually using their voice assistants in their cars than they are on the smart speakers in their homes. And when you think about the fact that OEMs are now integrating voice technology into these cars, we're going to see an explosion during the commute over the next 2 years. And you know, the average commute time is an hour a day, and that's idle, hands-free time that you can't really do anything else. So voice technology can really transform the car into a hub for conversation, for content, and for commerce in many ways. Another trend that we're seeing is voice in the enterprise. So because of the consumerization of voice, we're finally seeing applications internally within organizations. PricewaterhouseCoopers put out a study that said that AI would add $16 trillion to the global GDP over the next 10 years. And a lot of that is coming from AI automation and productivity, which is where voice AI does the job really, really well. It's just so much easier to speak, 3 times faster, in fact, than it is to type. So you can see how it can really start to improve employee satisfaction, start to improve productivity, and actually impact the bottom line of some of these organizations.
Rain has been creating conversational experiences for top companies. You mentioned a few. There was a Nike commercial that you really got a lot of attention for. Talk about that Nike commercial.
Sure. So with Nike, in conjunction with Google Assistant, we created the first voice-activated sneaker drop for the launch of its Adapt BB sneaker. I'm not sure if you've seen these, but they're essentially the first self-lacing sneaker. You just put your foot into it and it kind of laces up and conforms to your foot. And this was a huge product innovation and launch for Nike, one of the biggest ones in the last 10 years. And so they wanted to make a big splash with the campaign. During a live Celtics and Lakers basketball game, we actually sold these sneakers during halftime. So throughout the game, there were prompts up on the screen where users at home, through their Google Assistant, could ask questions about the sneakers, about players wearing the sneakers. And then during halftime, there was a moment where you could actually say, hey, Google, where can I get those sneakers, and purchase them. And you know, for that batch of inventory that we had, we actually sold out in under 5 minutes. Now, this example was really exciting for two reasons. One, it goes back to that system thinking that I talked about earlier. That interaction only worked because, the NBA, the live event was tied to a Google Assistant command, which was tied to Nike's payment system, which was tied to, a website where they fulfilled their sneakers. And all of that had to work together in a single second. And the second piece is it really proves the use case of voice and transactions and the ability for people to actually buy things through voice, which is going to be a real inflection point for the industry. We have found that because it's so seamless and frictionless, when people are ready to make a purchase, they may not discover a product through voice. They may discover it on other channels, but when they're ready to make that purchase, they do that very easily through voice.
What are the ways that voice is driving business today?
Sure. I can give you three pretty core use cases of how you can think about voice being applied today. One is to build brand affinity and engagement with a brand. A great use case here would be the work that we've done with Tide. We built a Alexa experience where you can essentially ask Tide in the moment of panic, how do I get a mustard stain out of a silk shirt? And Tide comes in that moment as the authority and says, okay, here are the instructions to get that out. Not necessarily a product promotion in that moment, but it really creates category authority for Tide, and it builds a relationship with the consumer that Tide is there when you need them. So that's one use case. A second use case would be transactions. And what we've said is that voice is very good for what we call bottom of funnel conversion. So again, while a consumer may discover a product on other channels, when they're ready to make that purchase, voice is so immediate and seamless and frictionless that it's an easy channel to make a purchase. And the two examples that I've already given, Nike and Starbucks, are great examples of consumers adopting voice as a platform for making payments and transactions. The third use case would be operational efficiency within organizations. A great example here is the work that we've done with Marriott. So we worked with them to do a pilot where we put Alexa devices into some of their hotel rooms to improve the guest experience. And while the priority was guest experience, one of the secondary benefits is that by putting those devices in the rooms, we were actually able to divert a lot of low-level tasks, low-level queries from the front desk to those devices. So for example, when a guest wanted the Wi-Fi password or more towels, rather than calling the front desk and asking for those things, they were asking one of their assistants. And that really frees up the load of the front desk so that they can actually focus on the customer experience.
That's fascinating. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, if you're just asking for, like you said, a password, towel, or what time is checkout, those are easy answers.
Those are easy answers, and funny enough, we have actually found, and this could go on record. Funny enough, we've actually found that millennials don't even want to call. They don't like to use the phone. They don't even want to call the front desk staff to ask those things. It's a burden on them to do that, and it's a burden on the front desk. And so the ability to just, and again, the experience has to work well, and they have to get the answer they need. But if you can build that experience correctly, there's no reason for that question to go to the front desk.
How can voice enhance a brand or business?
The way that we speak is just so fundamentally different than the way that we type or text, and that has implications on the type of relationship that you can form with a consumer through voice. It's really a two-way conversation. It's more intimate, it's more personal, and people tend to add a lot more conversational context when they're speaking versus when they would type something into a search bar. So there's an opportunity for brands to create real empathy in these engagements and build an empathetic relationship with consumers that hasn't existed in the past. When Alexa first launched, 500,000 consumers told her, "I love you." That doesn't happen with other technology. And a great brand example here would be with Capital One. They launched an Alexa skill, which is essentially an app where users could essentially get financial information through the platform. So check their balance, make small transactions. And I think they expected at first that they were going to have a lot of consumers asking questions like, "Hey Alexa," or "Hey Capital One, what's my balance?" But what they found is that a significant number of people were asking questions like, "Hey Capital One, how am I doing?" I mean, that is such a loaded, kind of rich emotional question, and it really creates an opportunity for a financial institution like Capital One, which is normally very transactional, to create a more meaningful and emotional connection with its consumers.
How do you see voice AI in tomorrow's workplace, and today's workplace as well?
So any industry that will be disrupted by automation will be disrupted by voice AI. PwC put out a prediction that said that AI will add $16 trillion to the global GDP over the next 10 years. A lot of that is coming from AI automation, productivity, which are two areas that voice AI does its job really, really well. It's faster and easier to speak than it is to type or text. And Mary Meeker, in one of her recent reports, has said that she believes voice input is actually going to be one of the most efficient forms of computing in the future. And I'll give you two examples of this. One, in manufacturing, we've seen that voice AI has reduced employee training time and increased productivity by up to 40%. Just think about, in the construction space, for example, how much easier it is to input data through voice than write it down on a piece of paper. Another area where we've seen this transformation is in financial services. We've actually created a couple of voice tools that allow financial advisors and investors to get rich financial data and information more easily through voice than they would through search or through a traditional terminal. And so you could see how either of these use cases would have very outsized impact at scale.
How can voice AI enhance our lives?
This is an interesting question in that, I'm in this field and I'm so passionate about the technology and understand how technology can really be a catalyst for change and transformation. But at the same time, I understand some of the negative impacts of technology. We check our devices every 12 minutes. We're literally handcuffed to these devices, and that has implications on mental health, on physical well-being, especially among adolescents. And I don't need those statistics to know that because I have a 4-year-old daughter and I see it happening in my own home. The idea of her being present when there's an iPhone or another device around is kind of, not a thing. For me, voice really has the power to transform this relationship with technology. And that's because it isn't the thing. It's not a mobile app. It's not a screen. It's really an interface that controls all of the other technology. And for that reason, it's two things. One, it's more social. So, when my daughter is having a conversation with Alexa or Google, it's not isolated. I can actually hear what she's saying and participate in that conversation. And two, it's less addictive. Some of these devices do have screens, but it's not tied to the screen. You don't have to stare at a screen in order to search for information or get the information that you need. And so voice really has the potential to free up our eyes, free up our hands, and bring some of that attention back. And at RAIN, we believe that if we're doing our job well, voice AI will be what moves technology into the background, what makes it invisible so that some of that human connection can come back to the front.
How is voice AI involved in politics?
Interesting. Yeah. So, I think voice has a big role to play in politics, mainly because disengagement and, lack of mobilization are two of the biggest issues that we face in modern politics, and voice can play a role in both. For one, voice provides a real opportunity for candidates to have a conversation with potential voters that they may not have been able to have in the past about issues that voters care about. Imagine if you could ask one of your devices, what's Elizabeth Warren's take on global warming or healthcare, and actually hear her answer in her own voice. And the information that you need immediately, rather than having to, scroll through rather than having to look up a website and scroll for that information. That immediacy and transparency of data is something that people are craving. A second area is political donations. Amazon actually just recently today announced that in the upcoming election, they're going to allow people to make political contributions and political payments through voice. And again, because it's such a seamless and frictionless and immediate platform, it's an excellent way to get some of that real-time engagement that we haven't seen in the past.
What about fake news and voice technology?
Like with any technology, there are going to be good and bad actors, and I think that everyone in this ecosystem needs to play a role in combating that. Us as RAIN, the makers, the brands, the technology companies. from a tech company perspective, they frankly have to do better than they have in the past about protecting vulnerabilities on their platforms. But when it comes to voice AI, I do have confidence in that the relationship that consumers have with these assistants is so sacred, and it relies so much on authenticity and trust of that relationship. And so there is incentive for, I believe there's incentive for the tech companies to protect the integrity of their assistants. From my perspective and from the maker perspective of Rain, you know, it comes back to that system thinking that we talked about in the past. In the same way that the technology may advance to create, you know, deep fake voices and fake news, the technology should also advance to create really seamless and frictionless multi-step authentication. You know, there should never be one single touch point of authentication, whether it's voice or another channel. You know, today we have so much data about people through their mobile phones, through all of the different touch points in their lives, that we should be able to create a profile and a picture of consumers without just one touch point. And I think we're seeing that starting to happen with what Apple's recently done with payments. They just launched their credit card, which has no identification information on it at all, and that's because they don't need that. You know, they're getting a profile and identification of the consumer through other channels, through the phone, through their Fitbit. And so I think that's what we're going to move toward.
You mentioned this earlier, but I'll ask it again, the impact on commerce of voice technology.
Voice commerce is projected to be a $40 billion industry in the US and the UK over the next 2 years. And while it's a new behavior, because it's so frictionless and immediate, we're finding that people are adopting it very, very quickly. What we found is that voice is very good for bottom of funnel conversion. And what that means is a consumer may learn about a product in other channels, on social, in a retail environment, but when they're ready to make that purchase, voice is a very immediate way to be able to do that. And the two examples that we spoke about earlier, Starbucks and Nike, are great examples and proof case and use cases and proof that people are willing to make transactions and payments through voice.
On your website, I saw some stats that 99% of us will use voice AI, and I don't know how close we are to that, but what's your prediction of how soon we'll get to that?
So I believe the statistic you're referring to is actually about speech recognition accuracy versus adoption, but the two things are, you know, go hand in hand. So the chief scientist at Baidu, his name is Andrew Ng, has essentially said that when speech recognition technology goes from 95% to 99%, that's when we're really going to see adoption and acceleration of voice technology. What's incredible is that most of the big tech companies today are already in those high 90s, and many of these technologies can actually understand humans better than humans can understand each other. And so, you know, it's really a cycle, and, you know, the more people who are adopting this technology, the more data and learning data and training data that goes into these algorithms, so that the speech recognition and the NLP technology gets that much better, which then makes more people adopt it, and so on and so forth. And so adoption is really what's fueling the growth of this technology.
What are the 7 voice technology predictions for 2019?
So I'll give you a couple in the interest of time. One would be that we're going to see the rise and proliferation of more assistants, specifically brand-owned assistants, or what we refer to as first-party assistants. We're already seeing this with Bank of America's Erica assistant, and BBC just launched an assistant named Beeb. And these aren't meant to compete with Amazon and Google. I do believe that in the future you're going to have experiences on those companies as well. But by bringing these assistants in-house, it actually allows these brands to collect more data and create a more rich customer profile such that they can create more seamless and connected customer experiences. The second prediction would be that voice is really going to take off in new touch points like the car. Today, twice as many people are using voice in their cars than they are those speakers in their homes. And when you think about the fact that OEMs are going to be integrating this technology into cars, there's going to be such growth over the next 2 years. And the car really presents an opportunity because it's this hands-free idle time where, you know, the average commute is 52 minutes. And so there's an opportunity for the car to become a hub for information, for content, for commerce, for a lot of different things. So the third prediction would be that voice assistants are really going to move toward more proactive AI assistants. So today, when I need information or I have a command, it's kind of a call-response relationship with these devices and these speakers. And that's really starting to change, and we're seeing that with Google's duplex technology, and where these assistants are actually going to start to proactively make decisions on the behalf of consumers. So going back to that Capital One example, rather than a consumer saying, "What's my balance?" the assistant would just proactively start to make purchases based on the consumer's history and based on the consumer's financial picture. We're definitely not there yet, but as we collect more data through these platforms, as we start to collect more biometric data on users through other places like the phone and through, you know, wearables, there's going to be a world where these assistants can start to act on our behalf.
That's fascinating. Wow, it's a whole new world, and it's changing every second. So thank you so much for your insight.
Of course.
Thank you for watching Sarder TV, an idea-sharing platform where thought leaders come to share their ideas. I'm Vanessa Tyler. Join us next time.